back to Evan the Counselor Live. I'm sorry, folks, it's been a while. I always seem to be apologizing, but I've been busy making videos, trying to finish my communication book finally after however many years. I promise I'm getting close. But today we have our first repeat guest, and that is Dr. Sood, the psych doc of TikTok. He is a psychiatrist out of Virginia. He is a fascinating guy. As I said, he's been on the show before. It was the episode A Therapist and a Psychiatrist Walk into a Bar. And since I'm so clever at titling, we're going to call this one A Therapist and a Psychiatrist Walk into a Bar again. So we cover a lot of interesting topics, all of the main headlines in mental health of the day. But one of the main topics we covered was Adderall and the decisions he makes when putting someone on Adderall and some of the considerations. And I share some of my experiences working with folks with addictions who are on Adderall. So it made for a really good conversation. And again, he's a super fascinating guy. I always learn a ton from him. He says he learns a lot from me too, but I think he's just being flattering. But anyways, I want to apologize as well. The sound, we had some issues on with recording on TikTok Live, so it's definitely not the best on my end. But anyways, it was a great conversation, and without further ado, here is Dr. Sood, the psych doc of TikTok. But it's been a while.
It's been a long time. What's been new with you? You're still over in Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm still in MN. When did you do this last? Was this like... was this last year?
Yeah.
I have no concept of time.
It was like 6 months ago, or maybe more than that. I don't know. I just remember having a great time.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we're a fun duo. You know, we just have a radio show.
We should just on air with Ash and Evan. I would love that. We could do it. Why not?
Yeah, this is like this is like, a modern radio show basically.
Pretty much. And I'm down to learn, do whatever. So yeah.
Oh wow! If I could teach you something, that would be.
Of course. Are you kidding me? I learn something new every day, man. It is wild how much knowledge I'm getting poured on, especially after graduating from fellowship. It's wild.
Yeah. No, so what's new with the practice?
Not much, man. I finished fellowship at Cornell and Columbia, and now I am a full-fledged attending doctor. I've joined a group practice out in DC, Washington, DC. And so I see patients now through that practice. It's called Washington Interventional Psychiatry. And so I see all types of patients for, ADHD, depression, substance use, all that type of stuff. So it's a lot of learning on the go. And then we also do some ketamine treatment and TMS treatment. So
oh wow,
trying to get out there, man.
Yeah, those are getting popular. That's all the rage.
We could spend an hour talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be on our agenda today.
Oh, heck yeah.
I made a little agenda. But yeah, I definitely want to get your take on that.
Absolutely.
So wait, weren't you in New York before?
Yeah.
Or did you move or telehealth or what?
I did. So I finished 5 years of New York city life, especially during the pandemic, getting all my training done.
Sure.
And then I graduated in June, and my wife and I, we moved down to Virginia. And we had a baby, so it's been like, yeah, man.
All right, so you have some updates then.
Yeah, that's why I was like so confused sending the messages back and forth because I'm like in a sleep deprived state. So I was like, oh yeah, tomorrow, and you're like, no, you mean Wednesday, right? I was like, Evan, you're absolutely right. I am totally.
That's an Evan. You just pulled an Evan right there.
What do you mean?
The roles were.
Oh,
that's something. Like I have no concept of time.
Absolutely, it's just gone.
Yeah, but I mean, as a dad, it's a whole nother level.
It is, man. I have so much empathy now for parents. I did have it before, but like as a child psychiatrist, and now it just blows my mind. I'm like, yep, okay, this makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah. I think I have like a healthy appreciation for how much parenting is for someone who doesn't. Like that's what I'm like so afraid of it because I feel like I know how
It
much. Because like I could barely, with all the stuff I'm doing, it's like how can I have a kid? And I see people who do that. I mean, they're doing like all these amazing, like more than what I'm doing, and they have a kid. I'm like, how the hell do they do that?
it's so impressive. I mean, it's like you kick into another gear you never knew you had. And so I thought I was good on like 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I thought it was fine. And then I'm like, well, apparently I function on 3 to 4 hours here and there. So
Like, dad,
what was that?
did you feel that? Did you are you experiencing dad strength?
Oh my gosh, dad
Like
reflexes.
20% more muscle capacity.
It's kind of funny. The dad jokes are coming out. The dad strength is definitely there. I have like a new knack of putting things together and like not wanting to take directions from everybody else. It's just this like something is kicked in where you just start developing these kind of habits and like you want to be like
Mhm.
super mechanical with things. It's very interesting. I didn't it's
Yeah.
never passed me by before, but yeah. Yeah, it's wild. You don't see kids, right?
No, adolescence. I haven't seen him in a couple of years though.
Okay.
I, yeah, I kind of stopped. I don't like. I don't get as many referrals for it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to get a lot more, but I don't know. It's just like the liability, and I think maybe it's because like I have my own business now. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think I don't have. I think with adolescents, they're either like really easy and fun, or it's a lot. And so I love the kiddos, as some refer them, but
Somebody
like
might
I'm
be happy
afraid
with
of
that.
getting like a really high needs one because you just don't know,
Yeah.
and I just don't feel like I'm trying to like get better at recognizing like my own limitations and like not taking on everybody and being like, okay, here's where I'm at. Like,
Yeah.
what do I have the capacity for like even if I'm like seeing a client and I'm like I'm just like not the best person for the job, or I'm just like not serving them. And whether it's like outside of my expertise or whatever, or it's just like maybe it's just like not a good match, and I like find myself like spacing out, and it's like, all right, I gotta like just get better at clinically at like you know knowing my limits, and you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you. There's certain cases I can't touch because I just don't know have that expertise. So it takes wisdom to figure that out, though. So it sounds like you're kind of like, you know, rocking out at
Wise
that.
up. Well, yeah, and I think it's like you only could fill out too many CPS reports,
Yeah.
until you're
Yeah.
just like I don't know. I think it's like that. I don't know. I hate that. No one likes it, but
Sure.
because the thing I hate about it most is like even if you tell people at the beginning, like here is the mandated reporting rate, it's not always super clear,
Yep.
and so they may say something, and I'm like, you can't take that back,
You
right? And then
can't.
then
There's no takebacks on that.
I have to report that. Oh no, please no, and it's just like
Right.
I have to. Like, I don't,
I got pretty good training on that at Columbia because we had to I made a
Mhm.
couple ACS or what we call ACS, but it's the equivalent of CPS reports all around the country, and it was
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
nerve wracking initially, but then I realized that like at least in New York when I was doing it, what it really helped with was like adding extra resources into the picture. So like if I needed to get somebody into like DBT, if I called ACS because, like, say, parent hit child or, child was being neglected, they got that, like, kid into family therapy within a week. So I was like, well,
Yeah.
this is a great resource. This worked out.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So I
Well,
started using it like that.
yeah, I think that this would be an interesting topic because you and I last time we talked a lot about like narratives,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're getting a lot. I just had like a big political fight out of nowhere in the comments,
Oh,
nothing to
snap.
do
All
with
right.
politics. Yeah, but like we have politics and mental health, and
Yeah.
I don't know, and I've noticed that like for better or worse, I mean, there's a lot of backlash against stuff like CPS, like especially understandably with some of the history of taking people out of like minority communities And where's the balance there of like someone who's like, hey, I know here in Minnesota, most of the CPS workers, like, they do their best. They don't want to take, like, they
Yeah.
don't enjoy taking people from their home, right, and separating from their parents. But there's a lot of these situations where maybe in that moment they're just not fit, and that kid is in danger.
Right.
It's like, where do you find balance? And I just hear a lot of those narratives. I don't know what your
Narrative.
thought is.
It's so I'm studying for my child psychiatry boards right now, and one of our major areas of kind of areas to study is the foster care system, because we are
Yeah.
often the kind of oh great, family doc here with no child and adolescent psychiatry available. Any recommended resources? Oh, tons of resources. In terms of foster care, well, so it depends on the state in which that whatever agency is providing those types of resources. If for that family doc, if you're interested, you can go to basically, I think it's like acs.ny.gov, which will give you a lot of information about the child care placement, but it's in different states. What we basically learn from all this teaching is that separation of the child and the parents is like the last thing that ever occurs. There's so much work that goes into that solution that it's like you try to do as best as you can to see if there are other family members who can take care of the child at that time. See if there can be some mitigation involved where a service or a caseworker can come by the office. I remember having cases where, and I'm going to make this as not general, so for HIPAA purposes, but like cases where there were 2 social workers and 3 teachers and a parent and 2 psychiatrists working with the parent and the child to basically work with ACS to make sure like this kid was getting to school on time and was taking their medication. So it becomes such a collaborative approach a lot of the time. But you're right, like on the other hand, they're super underfunded, and they a lot of the time, like, they're going to do as best as they can to kind of keep the kid in the home and kind of push back a little bit so that the kid is, because taking a kid out of the family and out of the is like not the best, because it creates this disruptive attachment now that you have to deal with. You're putting them into a strained foster care system. If there's severe abuse, neglect, right, sexual abuse, physical abuse, any of that, then that's definitely like going to push for a little bit more removal. But there's so many steps before that. So I just remember being like really nervous about interacting with them about all of that type of stuff, and then realizing that, oh my gosh, like they actually are. And when the family court system gets involved, and this is in New York, right? So haven't done this in Virginia, I haven't done this in DC yet. But when it was in New York, where there's a lot of mental health expenditure that is spent on the population there were a lot of resources that could help ACS out. Wasn't the greatest, but it made me realize, oh,
Sure.
well, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed too here, I mean, because of how underfunded it may be, it's almost like it's known that if you make a report, like for for an adolescent, especially, it's not very likely for anything to come from it.
Really?
Like if they have a parent abusing serious substances, and just because they have to prioritize, right? And they'll prioritize younger kids over adolescents too, I noticed.
Sure, absolutely. This is a great jump and enjoyable start to talk about child protective services.
I know, people are just like, oh, great, this is fun.
Everyone's tuning in. They're like, child abuse, nice.
Yeah. Good light stuff. All right, so what is this new med? I wrote down my list in the other room.
Oh gosh, you're gonna put me on the edge.
All right, yeah. So, all right, guess what med I'm going to.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. So, all right, there's a new med I want to ask you about. Can you guess what that is?
I have no idea. But I have my Google. I have Google handed, so I can at least tell you the mechanism of action, what I think about it.
Are there any? Yeah. So there's that many new meds out that you just can't even keep up.
I don't want to take your question off the tangent, but I've really become big into psychedelics and psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and the FDA approval pending process of that. So that makes me really excited.
All right, so
But
that gets you. All right, it's an ADHD method.
Oh, is it
New ADHD.
Quellbry or is it
Yeah,
Journey?
yeah, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Quellbry?
yeah, Quellbry.
Quellbry, I'm pulling it up just for, oh yeah, Viloxazine. So it works similarly. It's a noradrenergic, meaning norepinephrine type medication, and it's used similarly to like kind of similar to like atomoxetine or Strattera.
Yeah.
What ends up happening, these are non-stimulant medications. They're extended release. You can offer these, but I think we kind of talked about this last time, and just in general, the gold standard for ADHD medication is a stimulant. That's just how it is. They're way more effective. 75% of kids who start on a stimulant medication respond to that medication, which is way higher than an antidepressant for depression, for example. So those would be your Vyvanse or Adderalls and your Adderall class state and or mixed amphetamine state, and then your methylphenidate class, which is your Concerta, your Ritalin. Those are going to be really effective for ADHD. Now, obviously, controlled substance wise, these are, I think, Schedule 2 controlled substances. So you need a DEA to prescribe it. And there's been a big push, obviously, as we've talked about via like comments here and there. Big companies that have been pushing a lot of stimulant medications. But the issue is that causes a backload on the pharmacies. So then people who have been on these medications can't get them. And then also side effects to stimulant medications. So that's where Viloxazine and atomoxetine comes into play. I don't typically.
Well, stimulants are very powerful, and people, have, reactions to, like not being able to eat, or like irritability.
Yeah.
Not being able to sleep. And then I think, and I was gonna ask too about like how do you factor that in with people with like mood disorders, like especially bipolar.
Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir here, because I don't typically like, the way I think about it is I have clients and patients who have schizoaffective, who have bipolar disorder, who've been on a mood stabilizer and who've been sedated and can't concentrate and can't focus. And a stimulant isn't an absolute contraindication in my part. It just means that I got to be a little bit weary. I got to think about, okay, if I do a stimulant, let's do it at a very low dose. Let's do a long-acting version of it. Let's do it at a kind of an early in the morning, see how you do. And let's have somebody watch you and make sure you're doing okay. It's not that you take Adderall 5 milligrams and then all of a sudden you develop a manic episode. I haven't really ever heard that before. What I have heard is taking like 40 or 50 milligrams late in the afternoon, and they just keep going and going and going. Now I'm getting the political commentary. Did we say something?
I think it's this whole DEA raid's got everyone in a tizzy.
What do you mean?
You're just head into psychedelics. You don't know what's going on in the world. Trump's Mar-a-Lago getting raided by the FBI.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Well, that's the FBI. The DEA is totally different. But yeah, okay, I can say federal agency coming at you. Somebody wrote, "Oh Lord, the bots are out." Yeah, no. Where was I about this? So yeah, I don't typically think it's a contraindication to it. I just say, hey, if we're going to start you on a stimulant, let me check in on you in a week. Or I tell the emergency contact, hey, let me know if they're not doing well on the stimulant, so we can just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and why? I guess I know there's got to be like some reasons for it, but why are like a lot of people still not on long acting?
I don't know. And that's a good question, Evan. That's a really good question. I get a lot of patients who come into my practice who are like on Xanax or on immediate release. And they feel like they need to be on a higher, sorry, photopper. They're saying they're not a bot. They just are an observant nurse, which I appreciate. But I see that, and I don't know exactly why. Sometimes it can be in the context that even on the long acting at the shortest dose, they have insomnia, and it's really terrible, or they have like bruxism at night where they're grinding their teeth and they hate it, and they're just like, listen, I want to try something that's a little bit shorter acting that this I'm going to take as needed. So like if I have to, when I was talking to the kick shrink, Dr. Mirza, who's on here, who's fantastic. He was highlighting in one of his TikTok lives. He prescribes medications to patients who have who have to take a lot of long tests, maybe a short acting, that they take it as needed, meaning like they don't take it on most of the days, but when they have a long test, they'll take it, and they'll take it at a low dose. They won't take a high dose. And he's like, that's typically a style of practicing, which is fine in my opinion. You can definitely do that. And that's just because people can't tolerate the duration of action. Vyvanse, for example, is 12 to 14 hours. So you take that at
But don't they give a morning one? Don't they give them an after? Because most of the time I find if someone's consistently on it, they take it in the morning, but then they take it again in the afternoon or something like that, or later in the day. Not just they don't just take one short acting at the beginning of the day, typically, right?
Absolutely. So,
common.
This is interesting because this is also, I start getting all nerding out a little bit about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, because when we talk about kids, for example, they metabolize drugs much faster than us, and yet their drugs also pass the blood-brain barrier much faster than us. So, for example, if you take a child and you start them on a medication, say this is level in the bloodstream, and this is time. So your x-axis is time, level in your bloodstream is your y-axis. So you basically, if you take a medication for a kid, it'll go high in their bloodstream, but then it'll go out of their body really quick. So what you'll often see is that they will come in with twice a day dosing or 3 times a day dosing, because they get a really good effect and then it's really gone quickly. So typically you'll see kids on maybe a long-acting stimulant like Adderall XR in the morning, and then by 1 or 2 they'll take a short-acting medication to get that afternoon through the day. Exactly. And so that's the pharmacodynamics of these medication. With adults, the bloodstream, it goes in through, but it takes a little bit longer to kind of get out. So you start switching over to that long-acting version. You start switching over to medication that you only dose once or twice a day. And then it comes to the third portion, which is adherence, which is, are you able to remember to take that medication dose? A lot of kids are like, I can't take a med during the middle of the day, or we'll talk to the nurse and they'll be like, yeah, I can give the med. He has to come, or she has to come in between periods. And then that works out well. But what happens if they forget coming to the nurse? So that second dose of the day isn't taken. So you start worrying about logistics in general. So yeah,
that makes sense. What percentage of your practice would you say are people wanting stimulants and or benzos?
It's actually
they're kind of I heard about this one med. I think it's called Xanax. I don't know.
You and I. Absolutely. Yeah. When that used to happen to me a lot at the public hospital. And one, in private practice, you can screen your patients. So addiction is one of those things where I'm really straightforward with it and say listen, if I'm going to prescribe you a controlled substance, and you have a very significant substance use history, you and I are going to be on top of it together. So I'm going to have to see you either every other week or every week when we start this. I'm going to give you a limited amount. If patients don't know this, but they should in general, we have PMP, or a prescriber monitoring program. After the opioid epidemic occurred, there was this national program basically to say, hey, you should be weary of what you're prescribing, because patients can go doctor shopping. That occurs. And that means they just jump from doctor to doctor and get medications. So I can look up a patient's name, date of birth, and see if they've been prescribed controlled substances in over 30 different states. And that way I can be like, well, you're telling me that you've never had Xanax before and that you've heard it's been helpful, but you've been prescribed it from 3 other doctors in the last 4 months.
What
And
about
so
Adderall?
Adderall is a
How
controlled.
much of that?
How much of people
Do
switching?
you see the same thing though? Like you see
Yeah,
some of that same
you
stuff.
you you see a lot of this in particularly in public and private school, high achieving schools, where kids want to get that extra edge because they are
Yeah.
incredibly inundated with so much information they have to learn in such a competitive environment, and you're seeing it
Little study
so
group.
much. Yeah, yeah, and you can't blame them because they're like, I want to focus, I want to concentrate more, even though they have like 7 AP classes and like 4 extracurriculars and right, and are like churning through college applications. Like you get some of that there, and so they often say like, oh, I've been compensating, I've been like, I might have ADHD because of this, that, and the other. And you just got to be really careful, right? I typically say, okay, forget the diagnosis, what are you having trouble with? And then I go through, okay, it's focus and concentration. Walk me through your sleep schedule. Okay, walk me through your day to day, tell me about all the activities you're doing. All right, let me go talk to your teachers, let me see how you're concentrating and focusing. Typically, I'll get a lot of teachers who will write back and say, this is a stellar student. They're not fidgeting in class. They're incredibly focused. They're like, you know, they're like right in the front and ready to act and engage. I'm not sure why you're sending me this form.
So why is it a big deal? Right? Why not just give people Adderall?
Well, it's like, for example, me saying, why don't I give you a torvastatin, a statin for high cholesterol, even though you're like a 30-ish male who exercises and is
Yeah.
healthy? Sure, that might help your cholesterol, and sometimes that might be helpful, but there are side effects to medications, right? We don't know the long-term effects of these medications when you're 70, 80, 90. We don't have the data for it. I actually asked this question when I was in residency training to one of the ADHD experts, like, what are the long-term fMRI or imaging of Adderall or long-acting stimulants on the brain after 4 or 5 decades of use? And the reason is we don't have the money or the interest to research that right now. So what another doctor on, I'm not going to talk about bad about any other doctors or anything like that, but another doctor on here skirted around this question on TikTok, and they basically said, well, the long acting side effects of this is that if you take your Adderall and you have ADHD, you won't get arrested, you won't go to jail, and you'll have a job and you'll be able to focus on things. And I was like, yeah, okay, duh, but that's not answering the questions because they don't, right, they don't know. They just don't know the long-term effects. So because we don't know doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means that, do you need this medication or not? If you are
But like,
incredibly, yeah.
can you say the same thing about like a couple shots of espresso every day? Like, what makes Adderall that much more intense or has side effects versus taking like 2 shots of espresso?
Great question. So
It seems like a stupid question, but like you
no, it's
kind of get
not.
where with
You're
it.
you're 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 nailing kind of like that additive substance to the body. What happens and what are we worried about?
Yeah.
Well, the dose range of Adderall versus an espresso is very different. You take 1 cup of coffee, 2 cup of coffee, 3 cups of coffee, you're gonna have jitters, you're gonna have some insomnia, you might even have withdrawal. Similar with that, right? But different receptors in the brain. Here you have a dopaminergic or dopamine release with excess dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. When you have that for a prolonged amount of time at high doses, your body develops what we call tachyphylaxis. It gets used to it, right? It's the tolerance effect. However, when you go off something, like say you don't have ADHD and say you take high doses of this
Was
Adderall,
that Adderall? The topo was that Adderall? Or you're talking about caffeine.
Adderall,
So you say tolerance with that. You build a tolerance to
you can
Adderall.
build a tolerance. That's why we offer drug holidays where we say take the weekend off from Adderall, or if you're on the summer, don't take it because your body, we can keep it at a lower dose. And so,
But couldn't you say caffeine though? I mean, caffeine people notoriously build a tolerance, and I see more people who have withdrawal from caffeine. We have like the horrible headaches and
absolutely.
lethargy, and are always complaining about I can't get off coffee and caffeine.
You're absolutely right. I think that with Adderall, though, you have such a higher. I like to think of it as like coffee in moderation is absolutely fine, but if we look at the general population, taking Adderall in moderation is not fine, because those people without ADHD who even take 5 to 10 milligrams of Adderall can be like up all night, can have really horrible kind of like irritability at the end of the day. It can cause dry mouth. It causes increased dental cavities. It causes appetite suppression, right? We are getting into the realm of where the side effects can be worse than just a cup of coffee.
So is Adderall addictive?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the crash, as you know, from like the addiction standpoint of anyone on an amphetamine who takes it for a long term of time, if you stop somebody who's on 40 milligrams of immediate release Adderall and they stop just out of the blue, the next 2 or 3 days, they're going to go in through almost a melancholic depression. It's
I've seen it.
Pretty brash. And you've seen it, right? Like, and similar, right? Like you think about cocaine, which is way more potent, way more higher, but similar mechanism of the action with the release of dopamine and the blockage of the reuptake of dopamine. You find
does caffeine not have a? Does caffeine not release dopamine?
Caffeine is works on the adenosine receptors, and so it doesn't typically work. Now it does light up some reward pathway at what we call the VTA, or the ventral tegmental area, going to the nucleus accumbens. It has a little bit of that, but nowhere near as much as you see on a stimulant or as cocaine or as crystal meth or anything like that. So there's always, for me, like when I think about these medications, the dangerousness of it to kind of, in this performance world, like if somebody's like, I'm going to take an extra shot of espresso or whatever have you, sure, do it, go for it. You're not going to feel good. You're going to feel pretty bad afterwards. It's not going to help you study even more. It doesn't study you harder. It's more accepted. But if somebody says, hey, I'm going to take 40 milligrams instead of my 10 milligrams of Adderall, that's potentially now going to keep them up for 2 or 3 or a day straight. They are going to be incredibly irritable. They're going to crash afterwards. And it puts us in the kind of this like danger zone where like you're now treading into an area where your brain shouldn't have that much. That's way too much. So I just think of it as like a potency issue more than anything, and just different receptor profiles.
Would you say that people with addictions, or just like in general, Adderall is more appealing or has more addictive potential? Like you hear more people abusing Adderall, or like more people seeking Adderall versus some of the other ones.
I mean, if you have somebody who suffers from alcoholism and there's that enjoyment from it, right? And then you build up a tolerance to it, and the only way you can feel normal is to drink. There's that population. When I think about Adderall, there's this really big extra component to perform well. I don't think of it as like a party drug. I don't think of it as like a social setting. Hey, we're going to do a bunch of Adderall. I think of it as, every time I hear about it, is
some people do it to drink just so they could drink more.
What's up?
Some people do it just to drink more, like college students.
I've never even heard that. But that's
they'll take it before they go out.
Yeah, like that.
Oh, yeah. They're probably not ADHD, but they drink. They're like, oh, I could drink all night.
I mean, yeah, right. Like that's just, now you're just doing insomnia with like drinking. It just sounds like a terrible mix completely. But I don't find it like that component of like I'm seeking it to get the extra high, unless there is that component where they're not performing well because they're not motivated to study for that thing, right? Adderall does not make you motivated. It helps you focus and concentrate. It doesn't increase your motivation in any which way. So you could be focused and concentrated, but if you're not motivated to study for that math test, you ain't studying for that math test, no matter how much Adderall you take. So it helps you focus and concentrate, and you think it's going to motivate you, but it doesn't. And then when it doesn't motivate you, you want to take more because you want to focus more on your work, but you can't. And then you start feeling that euphoric high from it, and you're like, this is how I want to feel.
Now, do you get more of that euphoric high from Adderall than the other ones?
It's a great question. When I remember back to my addiction lectures, amphetamines typically release the most dopaminergic release compared to like I think like alcohol and nicotine and caffeine. I can't remember compared to opioids, but
I think it's that like meth is like the highest from what
crystal.
I
I'm gonna
remember.
say I've seen patients on crystal meth, and it's like once or twice, and it's just wild how much of a release that amount in which dopamine's released and that habit's forming. So that euphoric high, what do I often see that? Not necessarily, because I immediately call it out when somebody, and I've had patients like this, who's like, I love feeling like this. I love feeling like this. I'm like, feeling like what? Like you can focus or that you feel really good? Because we should not be using the Adderall to make you feel good. That's not the point of the medication. Because now we are hitting that release and enjoyment of the drug. The point of
You're
the
saying though that you don't know if Adderall gives you that more than the others.
No, I don't know that. I do see it in Adderall, and that's
Well, that's
when
what I'm
I
saying.
immediately,
Like
yeah,
I've never heard of someone abusing Ritalin or Vyvanse, maybe a little bit of that, but it just
Vyvanse.
seems like Adderall is the one that people want. You
Well,
know,
Adderall,
just from
the immediate release, right? The longer acting releases are less habit forming. They just don't, just like any long
exactly.
acting drug. So that's why a lot of people do the long actings, like you were saying. You also can't snort Vyvanse. It doesn't work that way. You have to intake it and break it down in the stomach. So they're less habit forming. But Adderall is just like the easiest access to. It's also cheap comparatively. And
Yeah, compared to
it,
Vyvanse for sure.
yeah, definitely, right? Or if you think about the methylphenidates, like the brand names, people don't prescribe Ritalin and methylphenidate immediate release as much as Adderall. So I think Adderall has also been shown in mainstream a lot more, and
Okay,
I think
more popular.
more popular. So I don't know like what the numbers of who prescribe what and how much, but anybody who comes to me and immediately is like, I need the immediate release. It's very like, you know, let's see how it goes, let's see how it works, but we're not going to keep bumping the numbers, right? Because the moment you have the more euphoria, but you're not focusing, is the moment we're going in the wrong direction.
So, and I guess I bring this all up because, and I've warmed up on it a little, like, and I have a bias, right? I
Yeah.
very much come from an addiction background and, I own and manage, recovery homes. And
Oh,
that's been
nice.
an issue that's come up for, a lot of them do not allow it, like whatsoever. And we were kind of in that place. And, and I've probably because of the education I've gotten on here from you all, like I've warmed up to it more.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think we're all crazy. And a lot of people who like own and manage these homes are not, um, they're not professionals or anything, but they see folks coming into the homes and they just don't seem to do as well. And it may just be the mindset of them, drug seeking or like really feeling like they need to be on these meds, and it's maybe not even always the meds themselves. Maybe it's more of a correlation of where they're at in their recovery or something like that. But they just don't seem to do as well, and they seem to abuse it just like folks in very early recovery.
You, you see that with Adderall.
Yeah, more with Adderall. And so like I've warmed up and like it's kind of a loose policy, because now more and more people are on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to serve everybody. And I do think that, and I do think there's something to the fact that I think a very high percentage of people with addictions, like people who wind up like in AA and stuff, not just your casual, like, I took it a little far this month, but like chronic relapsing folks have ADHD or symptoms or like, it's hard to unsee it, right? I mean, it makes a lot of sense with like impulsivity or dopamine seeking, pleasure seeking, all that stuff. And so it makes sense as to why that actually could be very helpful. But it seems like when people are in like early recovery, they have a hard time managing. And, and I guess you could also say that folks in early recovery, let's say you go to treatment, just like people in jail or something will make like toilet hooch like just like anything to feel different.
Right.
And it may just, and it could be because you see people abusing gabapentin. I never understood that one, but apparently
Right.
a lot of people do that. They take it in high dose. Like, well, I mean, and you see people, they snort antidepressants. Like, and that's usually like teens,
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
doing like that. But yeah, so just I struggle with that still, where I still observe that as well. And I've again made it a soft policy of like if you're coming in on Adderall, one,
Yep.
I kind of see how long they've been on it. Like
Yeah.
you kind of they, versus like they just got on it in treatment and they're on like instant release. I just say like if you're going to be on it, like talk to your doctor about like extended release. Like I would rather
Absolutely.
because and it's not like I know it's like not my place. I'm not as doctor, but like I say, like, okay, that's our policy. However, if you talk to your doctor and they say no, like kind of like you were saying before, like this person should be on this, this is more efficacious, then I would probably flex. But it's like talk to them first because you are so vulnerable. Like you're a month sober off meth or like whatever, and you're given these like high powered stimulants.
Yeah.
Now, the thing you don't see I can't think of anyone who's ever been to treatment for Adderall, right? It is like
Right.
not as bad, right? So that's why I was kind of like, thought experiment. What if you could just buy it at the store, right?
Yep.
People aren't going to treatment for it or anything like that. But at the same time, you see how people who are vulnerable in early recovery can abuse that and often do abuse that, maybe just because they're looking for something different. And Adderall gives them that opportunity. So and I bring that up because all the narratives on here, like, all these people who talk shit on Adderall, they're just like old fuddy duddies, who are like kind of these archaic mindsets and they're
Yeah.
like conservatives and probably vote for Trump or something.
I do not vote for Trump at all whatsoever. But I will highlight that it's a substance that has euphoric releasing properties and helps with focus and concentration. And the euphoria feels good, and people want more of that part, right? But it also helps with the focus and concentration. So it also, I think, what people tend to forget is that too much of Adderall can not look good either. It can cause you to hyperfixate and focus. I think of it as like an upside down U diagram. I'm doing a lot of finger diagrams today, but upside down U paradigm where like on one end, if you're not treated, you're really not focused at all. And on the other end, you have too much of a release of dopamine or epinephrine. So you see the classic media take of the person who's like really focused on like certain details and like
Yeah.
they can't break that. That's hyperfixation. And now you're way over the like good dose, right?
Yeah.
So that's happening in the
Sure.
prefrontal cortex. And then you have a second portion, which is that euphoric release, which is that nucleus accumbens, right? Like that nice rise where you feel great on it, and then that irritability and crash that comes with it. So if you have that hyperfixation and that irritability and crash, the meds aren't what is not a good dose of that med right now.
Okay. So I have this one friend, and I hope they're not listening to this, but so they like lived with me for a while, right? And they were like earlier recovery, but long enough. And they were diagnosed with ADHD as a kid,
Yeah.
but pretty severe. And I kind of watched this level of dysfunction in this person. And there's other mental health stuff going on, but it was like on another level, right? Where they were not like they would be up all night, they'd sleep all day, they had every symptom of ADHD, and like they were actually like doing like working for me too,
Mm-hmm.
like part time, and like
Mm-hmm.
just shit, like the level of dysfunction and like just this severe ADHD. And I like actually sat him down, and I was like, I don't know. I think like this Adderall is having like a negative impact. Like you're kind of acting like a mild meth head, like not to be, derogatory, but I'm like, this is just like an insane level of dysfunction. Like, have you thought about talking to your doctor about like not being like it's clearly not working, and
Right.
it's clear that the side effects are just bananas for you, and and she's like, I've tried, it's a nightmare. I'm like, this is a nightmare. Like, so I don't know. Like, sometimes I have seen that with people who they think it's like helping them, but they're still doing all the same shit, you
Yep.
know. And
Yep.
I don't know.
Listen, like my biggest thing, first and foremost, is that we rely too much on psychiatric medications as a panacea to solve all of our issues, and I think that that is generally understood. But I think there is always a constant. What's the golden ticket that's going to take me out of this? And if you're not getting an appropriate sleep, if you're not exercising, if you're not in a if you're in an active traumatic environment, no medication I give you is going to change those things. And that makes me, I'm very, very like, if somebody comes with me, doctor, I'm not sleeping, I'm not, let's just take poor sleep, for example. I'm not sleeping, it's really poor. Can you give me something to sleep, right? Let's just start with that. My first 45 minutes of that interview is all about sleep hygiene. It's understanding, do you nap during the day, your family history of sleep, do you snore? All of this is so incredibly important before I consider giving you Klonopin for sleep or Ambien for sleep or anything like that. That for me will go do wonders, right? Doctor, gosh, I'm forgetting her name. She's on TikTok too, and she's wonderful. We talked about CBTI, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's the gold standard for insomnia. It's better than your Klonopin. It's better than your Ambien. It really works, but it takes time and practice to do. But I've given it to more patients than I've given Klonopin out because it actually works. It has really solid data.
I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of that.
CBTI, oh, it's fantastic. It's contraindicated with patients with like bipolar disorder because it does shift their sleep a little bit. But the whole idea is that first 2 weeks you do a sleep diary. So you basically get an idea of what the people like, what time to go to bed, what time to lay in bed, what time do they go to bed actually, what time do they wake up at night, what time do they go use the bathroom at night, what time do they wake up overall. And then you basically
Okay.
get all this data, and then you look at what we call sleep efficiency. The whole idea, somebody said trazodone for sleep. I'll talk about that in a second. The whole idea of sleep efficiency is your total amount of time sleep, meaning like when you're actually asleep over the total amount of time in bed. And the whole idea is you want your efficiency to be anywhere between like 90 to 100%. So I have patients take this sleep log, and I'm like, be honest. Listen, we're not here to perform. You're not hoping. You're here to show me insomnia, and let's go through it. And typically, 9 times out of 10, I get people who have sleep efficiencies that are 60%, 70%, 80% at best.
So meaning they're in bed and they're flipping their phone.
Exactly.
That's I
Exactly.
mean,
So then I calculate how do we get a sleep efficiency between 90 to 100%? And that looks like maybe like 6.5 hours or 6.75 out of 7 you're asleep. So I'm like, okay, so to get to that limit, let's first set a time you're going to wake up. So say they say 6:30. Like, all right, so 6:30 is the time to wake up. For you to be completely efficient in sleep, you have to enter your bedroom approximately 6.5 hours before you wake up. Meaning, we are going to restrict the hours that you're sleeping to the point in which you are waking up at 6:30 a.m. every day, and you are not going into your bed unless you are going to sleep. So no phones, no reading a book, no hanging out and just like bojangling before you go to bed. I mean, it has to be like 11:30 on the dot that you can enter. Now you have to wake up at 6:30. You can't push your alarm back.
I've
And
always,
when
I've always, I've always said that to people, and that makes a lot of sense. It's like because you could control when you wake up and not necessarily when you fall asleep. And so, like when you do that, right? And that, now I understand why with the mood disorder that may be contraindicated. But then it's like, okay, if I get 3 hours of sleep and I still wake up at 6:30, I'm going to be tired as hell, and then you're going to be able to
Yep.
sleep because you're going to be super tired. So it sounds like you're just resetting, and that is the most important thing is when you wake up.
Yep,
And then so then you go to bed, you go in your bed at this time, you wake up at this time. Eventually, it's going to catch up, and your body's going to fall in line. Basically, that's
it's
like the
it's sleep restriction. It's resetting the circadian rhythm. You're hitting it right on the head. And patients will hate this because they're like, I'm exhausted, I want a nap. And you're like, no naps. We're not doing naps. We're getting your
I
body to
hate
the
naps.
point. Right? No naps. We hate
I
naps.
can't
So
do it.
the whole
No,
idea.
I legit naps. Like I feel like shit every time I nap.
How long do you nap for?
So the thing is, if I keep it very very short, like 10 minutes, or
Perfect.
and not even get to that full like shut up, like when you're in that like kind of pseudo dream state, you're kind of in
Yeah.
and out. I find that even if I'm in there for 1 minute, then I come out really refreshed. But if I like fully fall asleep for almost any period of time, more than 20, 30 minutes, then I feel horrible.
Yeah, we see it a lot in those who have like, for example, if you sleep 45 minutes or an hour or hour and 15, you're going to feel exhausted. And the reason why is a full REM cycle. So stages 1 through 3, there's no more stage 4, I think. Stages 1 through 3, and then REM sleep. If you have those, that all occurs in 90 minutes. So if you disrupt that in some way, after 90 minutes, before 90 minutes, you're going to wake up exhausted, irritable, groggy. And so that's
Yeah.
why 10, 15 minutes or the full 90 minutes or longer. But if you're doing the full 90 minutes or longer, that just means that you're not getting enough sleep at night.
Well, then I can't sleep at night,
Right.
if I do nap that long. I
Yep.
mean, I think sometimes it's warranted, right? Like if you literally had just really disrupted sleep and like you had 3 hours for the last 3 nights, and maybe like a long nap is, you will feel better after that, and you may still be able to fall asleep later that evening.
Right.
But yeah, some people just love it. Oh, I love naps, and I'm just like, ugh. Like I get, you know what? I love the beginning. It feels so good, but it's just the rest of the day. I just
Yep.
feel groggy and horrible. And I'm like really lucky. Like I don't have issues. I feel like almost everybody does, And I mean, not everybody, but everyone complains about it. But I'm like, oh. And maybe it's because I set my own schedule, so it's like, which is
That's
not good. But like I sleep and I get enough sleep and
my dad.
I don't nap and I sleep like a baby.
My dad is a sleep psychiatrist, which is a field of medicine,
Oh
and
yeah,
he
yeah.
he talked about all this time that sleep is genetic. Somebody wrote in here maybe napping is genetic, and genetics is a
Makes
high. I
sense.
think if I remember right, Franklin Delano Roosevelt slept like 11 hours versus like somebody else famous slept only 6 hours
Reagan,
a night. Yeah, Reagan only slept 4 hours, right?
and then
uh,
Thatcher,
saw that trickle down, man. But
Margaret
the
Thatcher too. Maybe there's a correlation.
there is a correlation. Just angry warhogs, right? Is
But then what about? But then I've heard that anecdote like of they also developed Alzheimer's, like that. There's a correlation with not
yep,
getting enough sleep and
absolutely.
dementia
Sleep
later on.
deprivation is horrible for the brain. Horrible. There was a study where they took cats and they basically took out the part of the brain that controls REM sleep. And this is a really barbaric study. And this was back in, I don't know when they did this, but when they did that, and the cats died within a week or two. They all became psychotic. And that just goes to show you that parts of your sleep are incredibly restorative. And if you are sleep deprived, you're not getting enough REM sleep. And so you'll often find that people who are sleep deprived, when they take a nap, they will then all of a sudden have the most vivid dreams in the world. And it's what we call REM rebound, where your body is like saying, hey, we need to restore you. And this is the most important phase to do that restoration. So we are going to push you back into REM sleep.
When I nap, my dreams are much different than like overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a different type of sleep, and I have like really weird dreams when I nap. They're
Sure.
just different. I have weird dreams all the time, but
That could be a
what's
whole
weird is that
line
people
for.
who are. What about the people who are like, I don't dream? That's crazy to me, or they don't remember their dreams. It's like, I don't know. I feel like it's like a weird experience. You know what I mean? Like it's like part of the human experience is just having, but like bonkers dreams, and so you're like, oh, I just don't have that, and it's like that's just
Well,
weird to me.
Carl Jung said dreams are the road to the unconscious, right? Like that's where we
I
follow.
believe that.
and I agree too. It's very. I mean, there's a whole field of psychotherapy and analysis, which is dream analysis, to have you kind of lay on the couch, freely associate, and also talk about what dreams you had and what those themes are.
Yeah, because you're a psycho.
I am
Yeah.
not. I'm not an analyst. I'm not analytically trained. Fortunately, or
I thought you were
unfortunately,
doing. I thought you were
I I'm going
doing
to do.
psychoanalysis.
I'm gonna do a an institute that's like just once a week for the next year, starting in January. That kind of puts me into there. But psychoanalytic training by itself is I don't know if you know, but it's like a 5 to 7 year extra training process on top of all the therapy or medical school or residency that people do, and it's intensive. You have to be in your own analysis 3 to 5 times a week. So it's
It's
something
old school. What's the
super old
research
school.
on that? Like do they? What's the research out there on like the intervention of like psychoanalysis versus CBT or something? Like
We've
it seems so different.
it's honestly like there's like 450 different types of therapies, and they highlight that majority of which are all kind of equivocal. And so when you have your like DBT for borderline personality, that's great, and that's what the treatment is. Or multi-systemic therapy for conduct disorder, that's what we gauge and what we give. Analysis, I
Maybe for like really like smart rich people or something.
you're right. Like for example, an analysis, right? This is the thing that I can say now. I'm out of training. I loved analytic work. I was in my own analysis for a little bit, and it was really nice. But if you're a single parent household, if you are taking care of kids, and if you are basically trying to keep a roof over your head, I don't really see a point to analysis, because there are so many needs that need to be met before that. And I think analysis is
Yeah.
a much better way to get a better understanding of who you are, and how you kind of come across, and like what your unconscious fears and things like that. But for me, analysis can be incredibly expensive, and it takes a long time to get through. Do I think it's like something that should be poo-pooed on and it's not worth it? Absolutely not. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's a great time,
I just
but it's
don't.
resource
I don't
intensive.
have like a conceptual understanding of it. Like in a practical sense. Like what would happen if I mean I've done enough
Absolutely.
therapy to kill a horse, and like what would I get out of psychoanalysis that I couldn't get otherwise, or just like good old therapy
I think there's a
as
when I had an analytic supervisor, somebody who'd watch me in my just general psychodynamic cases, for cases that I saw maybe once or twice a week. And he was so great because he would be like, look, analysis is really different if you go once a week versus 4 times a week. There's just so much more that occurs in that extra 2 or 3 sessions that occur in that week in that office, where little nuances that you didn't think were anything really come out, and you guys get to explore that. And so he was highlighting to me, he's like, I was going 4 times, 3 or 4 times a week. And then my therapist, his analyst at one point was like, you know, you're often matching a lot of what I wear when you walk into the room. You have a blue tie, I have a blue tie, you have a red tie, you have a red tie, I had brown shoes last week, you had brown shoes this week. And I wonder what that means. And that's really hard to do in once a week therapy because there's a lot more content to go through. But what he basically found out was he was trying to compete with his therapist, because he found that he was becoming, in his own sense, in his own training, felt like there was this like father-son dynamic that was occurring in the room. And he didn't have a good relationship with his dad. So what was being enacted in the room was this kind of competitive, like, I'm just like you. You're not going to get a one-up on me.
well, and we talk about that in therapy a lot. I mean, I think one of the best classes I took was from this like really amazing psychologist, and it was all about just like therapy and therapy skills. And she always kind of harped on this thing that I never really had learned in any of the training I had before. But it's like she's always like, you got to ask yourself, who are you in this dynamic? Because you're not just you, right? And I've always had that in the back of my mind, like, who do I represent? Am I the big brother? Am I your dad? Am I like, who am I in this relationship,
Yeah,
right? And that therapy in and of itself is like a microcosm of life. That what's going on, to really pay attention to that, because how they're interacting with you may be how they're interacting with the world, and that therapy room can be practice, right? So
that's
you're
exactly it.
practicing the skills, the dynamics of what's going on outside in their life.
Yeah, and to do that in an once a week therapy, right? Like you talk about transference, right? They're transferring their
Yeah,
feelings
yeah, yeah,
onto you, right? You're the object in the room. But to do that, right, the whole point of it, and Freud talked about this. This was the jump from Boiler to Freud, where he said Broiler was all about hypnosis, right? He was like, if we convince somebody in a hypnotic state what they're doing, we can tell them about it after they get out of the hypnotic state. Freud was like, well, here's the deal. You can't, that's great that we can tell them, but they need to be consciously aware of what they're bringing up and what's happening in the room. And in analysis, you can do that more often if you're seeing each other more often in the room, like what's happening between each other. And then they, because they're seeing you so often, they can become conscious of what's happening.
yeah.
And so it becomes this, that's how my mentor sold it to me. How analysis can be much different than like supportive therapy or DBT or anything like that. Again, it's expensive though. Right?
Thought of like corrective experiences in therapy, how to heal those outside past relationships,
That's it.
and like doing something different. And I can think of like a couple really good, and I don't always think like that. I don't like always have that in the back of my mind. For certain cases, I do. A lot of the ones with like severe childhood trauma, I
Yeah.
find is where you start to see some of those dynamics where someone is like really, really traumatized. And I think a lot of times it's the folks who are reluctant to go to therapy. It's like their last ditch. Like they don't want to be here, right? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of talking about this. They're afraid of admitting these things to another person or showing their vulnerability to another person. I find that so often just comes from their, if you want to call it trauma, their past experiences. But some of the folks I could think of, you get much more of that transference, or you get that feeling like there's something more going, there's something more relational going on here versus me just listening, supporting, skills, CBT, all that.
Yeah.
That's where that's the fun stuff.
I absolutely, I love it when I've had interactions where patients have told me they've hated me. I've had interactions where patients told me they've loved me. And I will never forget those experiences because I'm like, wow, in those interactions, they're really bringing out all of their history onto me. And I have to somehow navigate this where I put myself away and I kind of like, like you were saying, what am I to this person? What is getting reenacted right now? And how do
Uh-oh.
I think I lost you for a second. That was me.
Yeah,
Am I back? Can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay. Um, it's like this, it's this, how do you make them aware of that enactment in a way that's gentle enough that doesn't cause them to run away from it?
Yeah,
That's my
it's funny. They always tell you later on, like a year in, they're like, "Oh, I hated you for a while," and you're like, "What?" Like, okay.
like, all right, fine.
But you stuck around, and
I
they
have
know.
to.
They know. There's like that distance. Like I hate you, but I know that it's not rational. Like I really don't, but part of me does.
Yeah.
Um, like I had one like very notable client of mine. He was bullied just mercilessly, just like didn't like straight guys, just like afraid of them. Like, I mean, I could go real deep into it, but like, it was interesting that he like picked me as like a straight dude. And we could kind of, and we've talked about it where it's like, there's like a healing element to that where you just always avoid straight guy, but then you come to me, and then we build this relationship, and then you could learn that we're not all bad, just most of us. But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. That's definitely it. The Kleinian kind of schizoid depressive phase, which we did a little video on that, but that's exactly it. Highlighting the good and the bad.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like with kind of where I'm at and doing therapy, like those are the
Mm-hmm.
kind of clients I like
Yeah.
to work on. Like I don't know. I'm avoiding the easy cases. Like
Cool.
I avoid and a lot of people are the opposite, but like I've always been known for that, like DID or something like, oh, cool. Like maybe I don't get a lot of that, but just cases that are like more complicated and more of like a depth versus like I've been struggling a lot lately. I'm stressed and been
Right.
fighting with my wife, been drinking a little too much, and I want to
Sure.
work. Like those kind of cases. I want to let's get deep. Like those are
Yeah,
the
let's
ones
do
that
it.
yeah, and I could be a little more selective. And I only see about 8 to 10 people a week,
Sure.
because I just have other stuff going on, and I mean I don't have to do therapy, but I love it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's kind of nice to get to that point where it could be a little more choosy.
That's good. That's awesome to hear, man.
And it was actually kind of fun too at the beginning, and when you're building a practice, and just you never know with private practice. I always thought like, oh, it's just cake and the working well, and then you just get just the most random assortment of people, and not everybody is like in a better place. Like some
Mm-hmm.
of them like maybe need to be in the hospital, and it's like you're
Yeah.
just kind of that first line of defense. You're almost like the general practitioner doctor, and you never know like who's going to walk in, and that's what's hard too. Is like because you want to, especially nowadays where everything is so specialized, and I specialize in this, that, and the other, but a lot of times it's not practical to have someone come in with something and be like, "Oh, I don't specialize in OCD."
No.
Like some of the
I
ones that are more flat.
listen. If you're training in this and you're a mental health practitioner, you already understand the disparity that highlights it, right? And so you can be. I mean, there are patients where I've said like, "Listen, I'm only tele," and it sounds like you need to be in a really wraparound service type of place. And I don't know if I can be that extra person, right? Like a DBT
Yeah.
therapist. It's just not my. It's I could be that if I had the resources to it, but I think also, I think for both of us, if you get a complex case, right, there's a beauty of learning too with that patient or with that client to be like, I've never dealt with this, right? DID, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
figure out like, I had a complex patient the other day where I was, titrating. There was multiple mood stabilizers on board, and they were going through a messy transition, and they were on the intake appointment with me. And part of me was like, should I take this patient? The other part of me is like, I'm a freaking board certified adult psychiatrist who also sees children. If I can't see this patient, who else can? Like, this is just my fear saying that I can't do this. And the best
Yeah.
I can do is be a supportive person, try to help them out, do my best to guide them, do my best to learn about them. And that's way better than where they are at when they've got nobody. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like, yeah, I will do my best practice of care. And if it's negligent in any which way, then I'm not the right person for this. But I trust myself to the fact that I'm not going to be like that.
Yeah, and I think there's, it makes sense in a way. We're kind of taught to fear a lot of these things we don't know. But I
Mm-hmm.
think like that's some of the best experiences the first couple of years of private practice where it really was a trial by fire. Okay, my dad, my kid died yesterday. What?
What
Like,
do I do
I don't know
with
what the
that?
fuck. Like what actually what it was really funny, like when I first started my practice and like I went in like really confident, like borderline cocky, because like when I got into mental health, like I was always like really interested in it, but I had my addiction license before. So I was starting like I was a little older than most people in grad school, so like I was kind of starting ahead a little bit. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I can do whatever, right? And then I go, and like one of my first clients, one of the other therapists, like, oh, I referred you this woman I've been seeing. yeah, it's her and her two boys, and their dad passed away last week. And I'm like, yeah, they were looking for some grief therapy, and I'm just like, you know, I shrank up pretty quick. You know, that cockiness went right out the window, and I'm like,
Absolutely.
but it was some of those experiences, or getting someone with DID, and I can't find a referral for them, or I'm the
Yep.
only one. And like, you know, those are some of my best learning experiences. You know, and
Absolutely. You learn so much. Brother, I have to roll in
it's a
about
fine.
a minute or two, unfortunately. I got to take care of the
Okay,
baby. But
yeah, we can talk forever.
yeah, I love this.
Let's see.
This is awesome. This is so nice, so refreshing.
I know I learned so much from you too. It's good.
What what
But
are what are the future plans for you? I want to know. Where are we going? What's happening?
like kind of more on the content side, or just
Just in general, like content, career wise.
yeah. So you know, I don't know. I plan on like you know. So I started my own group practice. You know, we got the insurance contracts. So I have
Nice.
4 supervisors now, which is cool. We got another. So there's about 7 people in my practice now.
Cool.
You know, we're doing all telehealth, and I'm getting the I have the addiction treatment license too that I've been working on for a couple of
Yeah.
years. So I'm trying to get those contracts. You know, then I have the 2 sober houses. You know, so I got about 20. You know, about 22 people at a time in housing. So trying to like really bring these things together.
Wow.
So that's like kind of what I'm working on, and I just do like all sorts of random stuff outside of that. But so there's that, and then on the content side, you know, I'm just gonna like keep doing what I'm doing, but I'm trying to finish my book. So I'm
Yeah.
writing a book. I've been writing like 4 years before any of this, and it's
Sure.
one of the catalysts for doing. So I'm like almost done with the rough draft. Look at getting that published, but kind of moving forward, what I really want to do over the next however many years it'll take is just I want to make like a workbook for everything, not one workbook, but I will like because I find like in doing this, learning how many people can't afford therapy and they can't access it, and I really like workbooks, you know, as either an alternative or an add-on. So like kind of writing workbooks for people who can't afford therapy and maybe doing videos along with that. And
Nice.
so that's kind of my biggest idea. So I'm going to see if I can get this book. I'm doing one on communication.
Okay.
Is kind of this big one I've been working on. It's kind of like how to take the skills of a therapist who's worked with like some tough clients and addictions and how to apply that in your like regular life or like conflict resolution, basically the guide
Totally.
to dealing with difficult people. Um, so yeah, so I want to finish that up, and then yeah, and then maybe do a general, then just start workbooks like general therapy. But then also like I thought about, you know, if I could get that and get a good stream going, and maybe doing a lot of the self publishing and find success with that, like just finding like you know specialists, not content creators per se,
Yeah.
you know, but people who are just nitty gritty, like doing the work, who are specialists, and maybe co-author books with them. So like do like an
Yeah.
OCD one. I don't specialize, you know, because I'm like someone who knows a little bit about a lot, you know, but like maybe co-write and do like all the legwork and the publishing, and you know, kind of you know, write some like really good clinically sound workbooks and make a series of those, and then just keep doing the videos. That's like my current plan. But then of course where I am now, I would not have guessed, you know,
Hey,
two
man.
years ago. I'd have
You're
no
you're an
clue.
inspiration, and the way that you've helped so many people
Oh,
is so wonderful to hear, man. And if you need somebody to help co-author that, you let me know. Happy to join on in any
I was
which way.
thinking about that earlier. Yeah,
If there's a child
we'll
component
cross
or
that bridge.
anything like that, yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, yeah, I mean, like stuff like that. Yeah, like I was thinking, like a divorce. You know, like a guide
Absolutely.
to divorce. Get, you know, write one with a lawyer.
Sure.
You know, get a couple authors. But you know, and like kind of like I said, find one for almost every issue.
Yeah.
I thought would be cool to like write a series over time. But yeah, well, I know you got to get going, but
Got to roll,
I want to
man.
hear about your plans next time for
Yeah.
this
Let's do this
of
more often. I'm more free now, so if you
yeah.
want to do this like once a month, or if you want to, you know, do some videos together, I'm happy, man.